conference season may have wrapped up in England, but it's still in full swing north of the border. The SNP's gathering in Aberdeen for the final time before crunch Holyrood elections in May. And then they'll try to extend their 19 years in power. Their leader and the First Minister for Scotland, John Swinney, joins us now. Good morning, Mr. Swinney.
Good morning, Trevor.
Just on Gaza, your former leader's Hamza Yousaf's family is in Gaza. You must be happy about the ceasefire.
I'm absolutely relieved that we've got to the point that there is now a ceasefire in Gaza, that the hostages will be returned, and crucially that the humanitarian aid that is absolutely necessary to support the population in Gaza can now be delivered. And I think the steps that have been taken, which have been taken collaboratively across the international community, but it's obvious crucially led by the United States, has got to a situation where we can begin to see an end to the brutality and the genocide that's been taking place in Gaza, and that's a welcome moment to have reached.
Can we turn to some of the issues that I imagine are going to be talked about at your conference? You told our Scottish colleague, Conor Gillies, that Glasgow had been overwhelmed, I think that's the word you used, by a number of asylum seekers sent to the city. What exactly do you mean by that?
What's happened in Glasgow, and what was put to me by your correspondent on Friday, is the implications of the Home Office not properly and fully supporting Glasgow City Council to deal with the implications of their decisions about asylum seeker cases. Scotland is a country that welcomes people who are seeking asylum, and we want to make sure the proper support is in place. But what the Home Office have not been doing is giving enough time, once decisions are taken, to give individuals the ability to stay in this country, proper time and support to arrange accommodation. And often, councils like Glasgow City Council are having to wrestle with significant volumes of caseload without either the time to make arrangements for that housing or the financial support from the Home Office to do so. And the point I was making on Friday is the importance of the Home Office responding positively to the calls from Glasgow City Council for there to be support put in place to deal with the implications of the Home Office decisions.
Your government could actually do something about it, though, couldn't you?
What's important is that the issues we're wrestling with are the implications of Home Office decision-making, and the way the administration of government in the United Kingdom operates with the devolved structures is that if the UK government is taking a decision, which in this case the Home Office is, it has to deal with the implications and consequences of that policy. Now, we have an approach in Scotland which is a supportive approach about homelessness. We want to make sure people are supported into long-standing accommodation, but that needs time, preparation and money, and the Home Office are not helping out in that respect.
That may be true in the medium term, but presumably Glasgow City Council would look to you as Scottish Government to at least help them with money, help them with dispersal. Has the Holyrood got no part to play in this? Is it just all the responsibility of the Home Office?
Well, of course, we're actively involved with Glasgow City Council in tackling issues around about housing supply and about homelessness. So the Scottish Government, for example, in this current financial year, has significantly expanded the budget that we're putting in place for affordable housing. We've also put additional resources in place targeted to areas of high intensity of homelessness to support the movement of properties that are not currently being occupied into fully occupied properties, and we're giving more financial support to help that. So the Scottish Government's very actively involved in tackling the issue of housing supply and homelessness.
Though, that you'd like a suspension of the sending of asylum seekers to Glasgow now? You'd like to stop asylum seekers coming to Scotland?
That doesn't have to be necessary, and that's not what Glasgow City Council have called for. What Glasgow City Council have called for is for the Home Office to deal with the implications of the poor handling of asylum cases by the United Kingdom Government over many years, and to properly support the putting in place of arrangements to make sure that people who are granted asylum are not facing the difficulties and the challenges of homelessness. And we want to work collaboratively to make that happen, but it needs the Home Office to make a constructive contribution to that effort.
All right, one way in which, if I may just finally ask you about this on that topic, one way in which it might be solved is presumably what the SNP wants, which is more autonomy over dealing with policy. Canadian provinces, for example, have autonomy over some aspects of migration policy. They can issue visas and work permits. Your predecessor, Nicola Sturgeon, and her predecessor, Jack McConnell, pointed out that Scotland's labour force is ageing. Would one way of handling this be for the Scottish Government to have the power, for example, that Ontario has, to issue visas and work permits?
Obviously, with the powers of independence, which is what the Scottish Government wants Scotland to have, we would have full control over these issues. But under the current devolved arrangements, I would... Well, that's just the point I'm coming on to, Trevor, that actually I would welcome such a measure of that type. And you correctly indicate that about 20 years ago, my Labour predecessor, Jack McConnell, sought the agreement and got the agreement from the United Kingdom Government for Scotland to be able to take forward what's called the Fresh Talent Initiative, which enabled people to stay in Scotland on a distinctive basis that gave them rights in Scotland when they weren't available in other parts of the United Kingdom. And it was to address that issue you put to me about the size of the working age population. And we're basically short of people within the working age population in crucial sectors of the economy, in care, in construction, in hospitality, in food and drink, whole variety of shortages. So the initiative of the type you put to me, with those differential powers which exist in some of the provinces in Canada, would allow us to attract more people to live and work in Scotland and contribute to our economy. And that's where the UK-wide debate on immigration has gone just into a terrible space. That there isn't the space so far because the Home Office and the UK Government have rejected our calls for such a proposal as that, to basically enable parts of the United Kingdom to thrive where we face challenges about the ageing of our population. So, in short, Trevor, I would very much welcome the proposal that you've put to me.
Well, that's helpful, that's clear. Just a couple of policy questions quickly, if I may ask. Conservatives say they want to abolish stamp duty in England if they're elected. Would you like that in Scotland?
Well, we have a system in Scotland called Land and Buildings Transaction Tax. We think that's an important measure. We obviously exempt lots of properties at the lower end of the price bracket so that people can get into the property market without facing costs. But property taxation and Land and Buildings Transaction Tax is part of the public finances. And of course, that supports our public services into the bargain.
So property tax stays in Scotland. The other thing that you have said this week is that there is no shortcut to reducing waiting lists in Scotland. Well, fair enough, but you have been in power for 18 years and 1 in 9 people in Scotland is on a waiting list. You are taking a bit of a long way round, aren't you?
What we're doing is we're taking the steps to recover from the implications of the COVID pandemic, where essentially we lost about 2 years in the care of
Well, Mr. Swinney, that was 5 years ago.
Particular procedures.
The pandemic was 5 years ago, and actually you had 13 years before that.
Well, yeah, and of course, obviously, we were making a lot of good progress on waiting times before COVID came along, but COVID disrupted our healthcare system. Now, I think the crucial thing for me to say to you is that waiting lists are coming down in Scotland, waiting times are coming down. Crucial, we've had a record year in the number of hip and knee replacements that have been undertaken in Scotland. We're undertaking more procedures than we were before. We invested additional funds and we've actually managed to deliver 60,000 more procedures and appointments than were expected. GP numbers are rising in Scotland, so the health service in Scotland is recovering from COVID. We're getting those waiting times and waiting lists down.
With respect, I think we might be looking at different numbers, but I think your government's numbers are telling me that waiting lists have risen since your last election.
Well, obviously, that's in the COVID period, but my point is that now we're seeing those waiting times coming down for individuals, and that's a consequence of the Scottish Government putting in record investment.
You got elected in 2022, which is at the end of COVID. Your numbers telling me...
2021,
I beg your pardon. Your numbers are telling me that waiting lists have risen since then in Scotland.
Well, they will have, but that's the point I was making at the beginning, that there's been an implication of COVID which went on from 2020 to 2022. That's when our health service started to get back to the normal way of operation, and we're working our way through tackling the backlogs that have existed, and we are now seeing a record number of hip and knee operations in Scotland. We're seeing more procedures being undertaken. We're seeing waiting times and waiting lists coming down, long waits coming down particularly. We're seeing the number of GPs rising, and we're investing heavily to support the National Health Service, and that's exactly what people in Scotland would expect the Scottish Government to do.
John Swinney, thank you so much for your time this morning. Enjoy your conference.